Zone, our governor, David A. Paterson.
Today, we are not just here for a bill signing. Today, we are here for an historic action that will change the course of life for 200,000 hardworking New Yorkers. Now, when you think of about what we're doing today, it seems almost anachronistic. It seems almost delusional. The actions we're taking today were actions that were taken in the 1930s during the Roosevelt administration, President Roosevelt, that addressed these labor issues for all Americans except farm workers and domestic workers. And you have to understand why that happened. Because they didn't have the votes to pass these new labor laws, which establish overtime and safety in the workplace, and stop the abuse of people having to work every day, and sometimes 12 to 18 hours a day. Well, they didn't have the votes, so they went to the Southern senators to pass this legislation. And the Southern senators wanted to pass it all right because they had workers in their neighborhoods, but they were not going to do it for the African American workers who comprise the majority of the farm workers and the domestic workers, and basically anybody else that looked like it. That's where we were in the 1930s for over 70 years, when some Americans had rights and others did not. And where there is discrimination, we are going to heal it, and where there is pain, we're going to stop it, and we're going to stop it forever. Now, I want to thank, but real hard work, working 14, 16, 18 hours a day, sometimes leaving early in the morning away from their families and not getting home late to care for others. They are real heroes of our society. They have protected the jewels of our families, our homes, and our children. And yet, they've never been recognized for it. They haven't been respected for it, and I won't use that word, but they have not been paid for it. So, the reality is that they have allowed a structure to go on where others don't have to worry about this problem. Some of the great members of our workforce can go to work every day and they don't have to worry about this problem. And the problem is, how do I take care of my family and put all the time I need to into our career? Domestic workers have taken those problems off of the shoulders of so many others. They are really members of our family, and it's time to treat them that way. Today, it is my incredible privilege and honor to sign the Domestic Workers' Rights Act. New York State is the first state to provide the basic work standards and protections for nannies, for housekeepers, and for all domestic workers. We are now going to start talking about an 8-hour workday. We're now going to start talking about a limited work week and a day off every week. We are now going to protect some of our hard-working citizens from discrimination, sexual harassment, and other abuses that they have suffered on the job. And we are going to guarantee that New York State's Department of Labor will conduct a research through a task force to establish collective bargaining for domestic workers, something that is a right, something no one else has, and something that's more overdue. Look at the situation that we have right now. We have workers that work long hours, they have no vacations, they have no overtime, and no health insurance. They can be fired without notification or severance after years of hardworking dedication and loyalty to the family. They are the structure and function of our society. They have been the skeleton and underpinning of our success. They are the wind beneath our wings, and we have totally disrespected them until today. Now, just before we came here, we took a picture in front of the Harriet Tubman, in front of the Harriet Tubman Center, and we wanted to do that in dedication to the Swing Low Harriet Tubman Center and to Harriet Tubman, who struggled courageously, went into the South over 40 times to rescue her brothers and sisters from slavery. Her strategies about eluding the plantation owners are studied by military figures at West Point today. But she did all of this to try to create freedom in our society. And that great lady of freedom died in 1913 at the age of 93. And you know what she was doing when she died? She was writing a speech about justice. So here we are, 100 years later, bringing into Harriet Tubman's world some more of the freedoms that she fought for. 100 years later, we are finally addressing the freedoms and the workers' rights for domestic violence of domestic workers. Well, sometimes there is violence. The domestic workers who have suffered too long and too hard. Today, we are going to add this to the Rockefeller drug laws, which we repealed just last year, and the stopping of the warehousing of computer information obtained from stop and frisk this year. Just yesterday, I signed another bill that will now negate the idea of having quotas for stop and frisk as a measure of how good a job you're doing. By signing the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And in doing that, we are going to try to restore to America some of the freedoms and protections that were guaranteed in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, but somehow have eluded our societies for a couple hundred years. So we're now going to bring on some of the speakers.
Supporters in organized labor that helped them, who never gave up. You know, the idea of workers banding together for mutual aid and protection is not a new one in our society. It dates back to the medieval craft guild. But, as Governor Paterson outlined, over the years and the improvements for working people, one group particularly, actually two groups, farm workers as well, although they've had intermittent success in other states, not here, we haven't given up on that yet, but nowhere have domestic workers been able to gain any level of decency, dignity, respect, and recognition by the law. That changes today. Yes. And if we collaborate...
People said, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Domestic workers don't vote. Domestic workers are not citizens, nor do they have any money. This is what I was told. They said this bill will go absolutely nowhere. But let me just tell you, just like the governor stated, just like the Rockefeller drug law, you have to look and have some vision when you legislate. You have to do what's right. You have to right the wrongs. As said before, this is the reason why we got into public service. It was a real struggle, let's be clear, an absolute struggle. First and foremost, I want to thank the Domestic Workers United for their vigilance. For their vigilance and their advocacy. I can't tell you how many times in 6 years that these folks were up in Albany. I can't tell you how many times they were sitting not only in my office, but in offices of probably some of the most conservative senators, and getting them and convincing them, cajoling them to make sure that they did the right thing. You know, as the grandson of domestic workers, I have always wanted to do what's right in terms of righting the wrongs that have been perpetrated upon domestic workers throughout the many, many, many years that they've been in existence. You know, I wanted to start this ceremony with the backdrop of Harriet Tubman,